Subtropical Gardening Podcast with Paul Plant.
Forget everything you've ever thought about garden hero plants. Heroes aren't necessarily the prettiest flowers or foliage plants. It's got to do with resilience and hardiness, low maintenance, and what really works and succeeds. Today on Subtropical Gardening Podcast, I'm going to uncover a particular plant, the ugly duckling, which turns into a swan, which highlights that sometimes we overlook the dull and the boring and the plants that we're used to and get fixated on the fancy new plants. I'm going to bring in an old-fashioned plant that deserves more embracing, and it is the ugly duckling we often overlook. And it's time to challenge your perception and identify what is it that makes a reliable plant? What is it that makes a hero plant? And are some of the ugly ducklings you grow, whether it's indoors or outdoors, fit those criteria? So we're going to be looking at those, and those plants might be in plain sight already in your yard or already in your indoor environment, like some of these plants around me. So in this podcast, I'm going to explore what makes a hero plant. I'm going to go through why it's interesting for its diversity, its resilience, and of course, why it's suitable for gardeners, whether you're indoor garden plant collector or if you're a garden planter in your particular garden. So probably the first thing is, what makes a hero plant? Low maintenance definitely is one key thing. Low pest problems is also another key thing. And the ease of growth, whether it's indoors or outdoors. Later on, when I feature and highlight this particular hero plant, I'm going to talk about some growing tips to ensure that you get the best potential growth out of these particular plants so that they really do become your hero plants. I know at my place, I do like them because they are the under reputation. They just seriously need a little bit more embracing because they are so good. Now, just as a reminder, if you do like this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. So let's get started straight into it. And I'm going to start off with basically, if I told you the hero plant is not a rose, if you know me, that's obvious. If I tell you it's not a tomato or strawberry, again, if you know me, that's obvious. I want to encourage people to grow plants that are suitable for them with low maintenance, low care, and tough, resilient, reliable. Those are the key things that I look forward to find a hero plant. Now, my plant, the one I'm going to feature, yes, folks, it's the Aspidistra, known as the cast iron plant, and it's got that name for a very good reason. It's been around since about the 1890s. It's been around for centuries, and this plant in the early days was a prestigious royal plant. The more leaves you had, the bigger the pot specimen, the more wealthy you were. So for those of you who have them, well, pretty special people. And for those of you who don't have it, I'm going to give you the tips on how best to grow them. But first, I'm going to go through some of the varieties and some of the information about this plant. It is, of course, the Aspidistra elatior, and that's its botanical name. There are other species which I'm going to go through again because some of these other species, I think there's been a little bit of mislabeling with botanical names probably in the last couple of decades. And although I may not have it perfectly correct, I'm going to try my best. But if I do miss it, please add your comments into the comment section because I'd love to get this all correct for people who are watching this video. Now, this plant is grown for its foliage. It's tough. It's these beautiful green leaves that handle very low light. It's not grown for the flowers, which are very small. They just sit towards the surface of the potting media or the soil. We don't grow them for the flowers. It's the foliage. Hardy, tough, reliable, relatively free of pests and diseases, and very popular. It's probably in the top 10 of every indoor plant ever created, because the common name, cast iron plant, means it's tough. Now, beyond just the visual, the thing about these plants is that there are broad leaves like this, the original species. There are thin leaves, which are actually some of the other different species. Let me just see. Yep, I'm just checking my notes. I'm going to cover the species a little bit later. The leaf patterning, there's spots, there's flecks, there's patterns when the new growth comes out, then it changes back to green, there's stripes in it, there's variegation leaves, there's all of these different things. There's the big leaf form, which is this one, then there's also some dwarfer forms to be aware of, and they are quite often the different species. We also like the fact that with this particular plant, it has proven test of time in terms of its adaptability to different climates. It can tolerate basically snow areas, very cold areas all the way up to the tropics. Most are subtropical in origin, which is why they do so well in my climate. I'm from the subtropics in Australia. But we also know that it can tolerate extreme conditions, both grown outdoors and also indoors within a house. Probably not near the fireplace or the heater, away from those extreme temperatures, but it is a really good plant for those conditions. There's also the fact that, although it's not glamorous, it's not the prima donna, it's not the royalty that it used to be, landscape architects and designers love this plant because it is so tough. And when no other plant will survive in a shady, dark area, usually in between buildings, this plant is good. It doesn't need much care. It's extremely low maintenance. Landscape architects and designers choose it because it is tough. And it provides that really nice green foil to soften the buildings, which is predominantly why the landscape architects tend to use it. And it just performs so well in shady spots. And likewise, it does so well in an indoor environment. So whether you have a small one-room bedroom apartment or you have a larger house and you're just trying to find a plant for indoors, the cast iron plant really does tick so many boxes. I have it indoors, and I also use them outdoors where I particularly live. Now, to start with, let's get down to the basic nitty-gritty of these plants. Besides what I just said, there are approximately 245 recognized species of Aspidistra. And what's happened in the past couple of decades is everyone has thrown them in together under Aspidistra elatior. However, that's not necessarily true. And there are some plants just sold as Aspidistra elatior, which I suspect are completely different species. And I'll try to address some of those a little bit later. Now, the true species, Aspidistra elatior, is native to southern Japan. It's a perennial, which means it has leaves all the year round. It has a rhizome, which is like a stem, underground stem that grows under the potting mix or in the ground. And from there, the leaves shoot up and have these leaves that kind of pop up around the pot. And the flower, which when it does appear, will appear down there. Mine's not in flower right now, and the flowers tend to occur late spring and summer in my particular climate. As I mentioned, this species is native to the subtropical areas, but it is incredibly tough and hardy all the way down to the cooler temperates up to the tropics. The other species, if you understand where they are from, you will appreciate more or less how best to grow those particular species. Now, in terms of the straight green, there is also a variegated. Now, I'm going to show you mine. It has lost a lot of its variegation, and I'm not too sure why. Let's see if I can find a leaf with some variegation. That was very distinctive green and white, and now it's more or less a gentle stripe color in there. It's not as distinctive as it used to be. And I'm going to have to track down a much better genetic stock of variegation and then grow that so that I have a definite, distinctive variegated plant to grow, because I do like them, and the color, and the variegation pattern I find highly ornamental and a little bit different than the plain green. Yes, I do like the plain green, but the variegated I think is a bonus to have. And in the nursery industry here in Australia, quite often the demand for the variegated one is not that high. So when you go to buy a cast iron plant, you might be lucky enough to buy the variegated one for the same price as the plain green one. But that said, there are a couple of other different cultivars and varieties on the market. So whether you're overseas in the USA or in Europe or in Australia, I'm going to mention a couple of cultivars or varieties that are on the market, and obviously there will be far more on the market than what I will be addressing here. So one is Aspidistra Asahi or Asahi. I don't drink that beer, so I don't know how to, I think it's pronounced Asahi. And that's a distinct cream tip to the leaves when it comes out. You've got also Aspidistra Galaxia. Now this is one of those ones which I think the name might be wrong, but I'm going to stick with that for the time being. And I like this because it's bold, it's spotty, it's very big, broad, fat leaves. I have had a bit of damage because I put mine, it got a bit of dry weather and sun and it scorched the tips, so I do apologize. My specimen is not as good as it should be. So this is sold here in Australia as Galaxia, and the seller sells it as Aspidistra elatior, sorry, my pronunciation just got wrong there. But it's a great plant. I love the speckled egg and a couple of splashes on the leaves. Highly attractive. Leaves can have a lot of the cream and the white, and otherwise it can be a lot of dark green, but it's broad. I find it's a very erect plant compared to the straight species, Aspidistra elatior, which tends to flatten out and become a little bit more horizontal as the leaves grow up and out. But that is definitely a beautiful plant worth searching for if you can track it down. And I was very happy when I actually tracked that one down. Another one is Aspidistra Goldfeather. And as the name gold, it's got a golden variegation stripes through it. You've got Aspidistra Ippin, which is a really bold variegated plant. And that one I will be tracking down and buying it. I know someone who has it in stock, and I will be ordering those online, so I have it in my personal collection. Very distinctive green and white lines on it, which I find highly attractive. There's also Aspidistra Mangetsu, which has ghost white new foliage, but that then matures, it kind of matures more green but it does contain and maintain a few white stripes on it. You've got Aspidistra Morning Frost, and I think I have one here. It's got a central limey green stripe on it. Let me grab it for a second. Now this one I didn't think I had access to, and when I popped into, there you are, it's not very uniform. That's what I've noticed with this one, and that is definitely the Morning Frost. A stripe all the way through it. It's kind of like a lighter lime green through it, but I do like it. Big, massive, broad, fat leaves. Very, very bold and distinct. Also stands up very tall and very bold foliage, as I mentioned. Another lovely, lovely one if you want that big, brash green foliage and just a little bit of color, which is that yellowy green stripe that runs through the midrib. Then you've got Sekko Kan, which has a snowy white tips with gold flecks. And then you've got Snowcap, which has vibrant white tips. And I believe that one keeps most of its white tips through most of the year, which is probably better than Sekko Kan. So I think I'm going to see if I can track down Snowcaps for my own personal collection. Now, added to that, obviously, there are some others which are a little bit mixed up. Now, let me just find the one sold as Milky Way. Now, this one here in Australia is sold as Milky Way. The leaves are nowhere near as large as elatior, So they're kind of more lanceolate, lineal, nice specks of spots through the leaves. It's a nice dark green. That's what she looks like. Incredibly robust. And tip, keep them in the pots as long as you can because they look so much better. The thing is that although this is sold here in Australia as Aspidistra, elatior, Milky Way, I do believe, based on some of the better information online, it's most likely Aspidistra vietnamensis, Milky Way, mainly because different leaf shape, different leaf form, different habit. And I do think that is correct. Another one very similar to that, which is often confused, is another one of my favorites. And this is Singapore Sling, not a drink. And very long lineal leaves, distinctive round spots and dots through it. Absolutely a beautiful plant. I've got quite a number of pots of this one. Only grows, about a foot high. So that's around about 60 centimeters or so. So it's that lower level height. It's that thinner habit. It's a beautiful plant. And this one, I believe I will probably pronounce this completely wrong, and I will put the spelling of these words in the YouTube notes. So definitely please check them out after the video, and I'll try to add the words in as well if I can. It's Aspidistra jingxiensis or jingxiensis. As I said, I pronounced this wrong because I don't know how to say that word. But it is definitely one of my favorites, and I've got, as I said, many plants of this one. There's also a couple called Aspidistra sichuanensis, Ichi Moro Ji, and that's got a central chartreuse, so like a greeny yellow color right through the midrib. Quite attractive as well. There are a lot more species. As I mentioned, there's about 245 species. Not many of them have entered into the nursery industry, the retail industry. So it is a case of trying to track these down through plant collectors and online specialist sellers. And please invest in them. These are the ugly ducklings that are definitely beautiful swans once they grow. Now, to achieve the perfect culture, the perfect specimen, it's all about understanding what the requirement for this plant is. So we're going to go through some of the cultural requirements for the Aspidistra. First off, light. How much does it need? Now, this plant is well known to tolerate low light, and it can tolerate it, but it produces very slow growth and not very many leaves. If you want more leaves and a much nicer, attractive plant, you need to increase the amount of light to the plant. So bright light will definitely help. Avoid full sun because that will burn and scorch the foliage. Watering is also really important because, again, this plant can tolerate low water, but if you want a healthy looking plant with a lot of leaves, increase the watering, but please make sure it's got very good drainage because the roots do not like being wet. So drainage is critical. So look at the right potting mix that ensures you've got drainage. Humidity is a concern for some people. Where I live, which is in the subtropics, we've got pretty good air humidity, so it does pretty well for most of the year. But occasionally, if I can find it on this particular specimen, this can happen. And that's a sign generally that there is low air humidity for a short period. And the evaporation, the translocation of, I should say, the transevaporation of the water from the leaves is more than what is actually is what the plant can tolerate. So you get a bit of the tip burn on the leaves. So if you see a lot of that, it's usually low humidity and the plants are a little bit stressed. But generally speaking, if you look at overall on this plant, it's very healthy and is loving the conditions it is in. Now, fertilizing, yes, please fertilize this plant. If you want healthy leaves, if you want more foliage, fertilizer is critical because without fertilizer, there won't be the encouragement, the stimulation for the plants to put on new growth. So if you want a vigorous, healthy specimen, water and fertilizer is critical, and bright light, not full sun, remember. The temperature range of the Aspidistra is diverse. It can tolerate the tropics, the subtropics, and the warm temperate areas. I don't know about snow and frost, that's not my experience, but I do believe these are incredibly resilient, tough plants, which is why it's underrated and overlooked. Pests and diseases, from what I know about this particular plant, it's relatively free of most pests and diseases. However, when the plant is stressed and not at its best health conditions, it is prone to show the symptoms of mealybug disease, mealybug infestations, and a couple of other problems. So my secret is keep it healthy, keep it growing really well, and that tends to keep away most of the pests and diseases. Now, if you are growing it in a pot and it's close to the ground or something like that, and if you've noticed ants within the potting mix, that's usually an indicator that you might have mealybugs in the root zones and on the rhizome. So you might need to use some type of a pesticide to eliminate the mealybug and the ants so you can get the health of your plant back. Another good strategy to overcome that sometimes is just increase the watering so the potting media is kept moist, and most ants don't like that environment, and it should eliminate the mealybugs. Propagating and potting. Well, in potting, these plants can stay in the one pot for quite a number of years. And I personally find that when it stays in the one pot, the roots will get, or the rhizome will tend to grow around a bit more and you get more upright foliage. I like the look of that. So I tend to keep my plants, my Aspidistra, in a pot between 3 to 5 years before I even consider potting up. But what does it look like after 3 to 5 years? They need to be propagated. So this is kind of what they look like after such an extended period. They're incredibly root bound, but all of these growing tips are perfect signs. It's time for potting. It's time for propagation. And propagation is where there is a rhizome. The rhizome is an underground stem that runs horizontal. So when you divide this plant, that's the propagation term we use. When you divide this plant, you're after a chunk of the rhizome, a healthy growing tip like this, and at least 1 or 2 upright leaves. Now, I do know a few situations where you can end up just having the rhizome, and quite often it doesn't work, but surprisingly, you will get a few that will shoot. So if you do split it and you get a couple of rhizomes with no leaves, keep it, put it aside, and do pop them up. And hopefully you should get a few that will sprout shoots and therefore leaves. But ideally, what you're after is a bit of rhizome with 1 or 2 leaves and definitely a growing tip, nice and healthy tip. So a cutting, or I should say a propagating division piece, should look a little bit like this. Let me just put it in front of my face. A growing tip, a shoot, and some good healthy roots. And this is what you would pot into a plant, into a pot, about that deep, and the rest in the potting mix. Now, in order to achieve a nice healthy specimen, I would generally put 2 or 3 pieces like this in the one pot so that it fills up very fast. However, if you only have one plant, you might want to be a little bit more cautious and put 1 division in one pot and let that grow. But I do like them to grow fast, and I do like them to fill up very fast. I'll just put that aside, and that's what I'll be doing this weekend. A bit of repotting of my Aspidistra. The hero plant is all about trying to find that one plant or a few plants that grow successfully, low maintenance, low care, but does really well in your garden. It could be the ugly duckling, and I do encourage people to find the ugly duckling to see if you can resurrect it and bring it back to life, and it can be your show pony in your particular garden. Old-fashioned plants like the Aspidistra are wonderful because they have a reputation, they have the history, and it's a really good idea to jump onto a traditional plant and try to get them to look the best. It still takes a little bit of art to keep these leaves pristine and shiny without any brown tips at all. I encourage gardeners to, if you are doing this or if you have chosen some ugly plants to improve, put them in the comments section. I would love to hear from you. And if you are a collector of Aspidistras, which I'm starting to get into, I'd love to hear what varieties and cultivars you've got and you've got access to, because here in Australia, our range is not as extreme as what you may have overseas. Now, the Aspidistra, as I mentioned, has been around since the 1890s, so it's been around for a very long period of time. It's proven itself as an indoor plant. It's proven itself as an outdoor landscape plant. The landscape architects and designers use it for a reason. And for that reason, it is worthwhile trying to grow Aspidistra if you've got the spot, the space that very few other plants will grow in shade. So probably here in Australia on the Southern Hemisphere, say for example on the south side of the house under the eaves where it doesn't get much light, not much rainfall, that is a really good location to consider for the Aspidistra. As an indoor plant, these things don't take much care. You can put them on a pot, you can put them on a windowsill, on a bookshelf, on a little pedestal, and they will really look absolutely beautiful. Some of the special variegated cultivars, I do believe they need a little bit more light because they have less green chlorophyll areas. They tend to need a little bit more brighter light to compensate for the less green chlorophyll area. Whereas the plain green leaf of Aspidistra elatior can handle extreme low light. But as I've said, based on the information I've given you on how to best grow it, how to get more leaves, please give it a little bit of extra light. So gardening, as all gardeners, we love to explore plants. We like to grow plants and see plants thrive or flower or fruit, whatever that situation is. And it is one of the most rewarding things as gardeners we do, because we are creating something from potentially what was not there before. And whether it's indoors or outdoors, it could be this wonderful escape area full of lush green foliage. So I encourage you to look after your plants. Find out which ones need less care and choose those as a starter. But as you do this, you will extend your experience and your horticultural knowledge and your horticultural skills. Try to find a few of those little ugly ducklings to turn into your beautiful swan for your climate, for your area. And as I mentioned, I'd love to hear from you what plants you are using and which ones you want to experiment for your ugly ducklings and turning them into that beautiful swan or ballerina. If you've lasted this entire video, which I'm sure and I hope you have, please give me a thumbs up if you have enjoyed this video and subscribe. Your support to the Subtropical Gardening podcast is greatly appreciated. The more subscribers we get, or I get, the more videos I can do. I can get some guest speakers in, some guest videos of items, and go to some interesting places and take the camera around and take those shots. So until next gardening video and next Subtropical Gardening podcast, happy gardening, and we'll see what next I do for the podcast.